Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm bringing you all the books that I read in July. So I think I've got about 9 titles to talk to you today, some fiction, some non-fiction, and we're just going to go in chronological order. The first book that I finished in the month was Untamed by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is an absolutely fantastic historical crime noir / thriller that is set in the 1950s in Mexico, and it follows our young protagonist who goes to work for a white American kind of family of sort of tourists who have decided to move to this very remote part of Mexico, mainly so that one of them can write his book, and she is going to act as a kind of note taker / secretary for him, as well as a tour guide for the other two. She then gets embroiled this incredibly elaborate crime heist that goes on between them, and it's about her feeling out of her depth and then how she can try and kind of claw her way out of this situation that she's ended up in. I adore Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing. I think she has the most wonderful turn of phrase, mastery of the English language, and I really enjoy the fact that she has... This is like the third book of hers that I've read now, and they're quite different genres. There's been like a horror, a fairy tale / folklore retelling, and now this kind of crime noir historical thing, and all three of them have been really striking and kind of stylistically incredibly sort of individual, but they've all been really good, and I think she's a fantastic author for just kind of having mastery over so many different genres. I think she's a real kind of jack of all trades for it. Like I said, I love her writing, so atmospheric, love the character arcs, loved everything they did. It really felt like quintessential crime noir. It was almost like a kind of Mexican version of a Raymond Chandler that I absolutely adored. So I think I gave it like 9 out of 10, and I would really recommend her writing if you haven't checked her out already. I want to check out, she's got one about vampires and kind of a sci-fi one, both of which I definitely want to read, so she's going to be back on my TBR fairly soon. The next book that I finished is The Root of Ice and Salt by Jose Luis Zarate, translated by David Bowles. This is a retelling of Dracula, specifically the journey from Transylvania over to the UK, and it's told from the point of view of the captain of the ship that Dracula travels on, but they don't know that he's on it. This is actually a Mexican author. This is translated into English, and kind of the first time it's been published in English, and it's actually Silvia Moreno-Garcia who really championed this, put it forward, potentially even dumped up some of the money for it. I think she might be still involved in the publishing company in some way. She also has an introduction or something in this, so it was really fun kind of reading it alongside her work. I didn't overly enjoy this actually as a reading experience. It's a very kind of broken up, sort of fragmented stream of consciousness style writing that just stylistically doesn't really work for me. But if you're somebody who is a fan of slightly more kind of literary playing around with the narrative form, I think that this will be right up your street. It just is something that I struggle with kind of regardless of the content of the book. In terms of the actual retelling and reimagining of the tale, I thought that it was incredibly clever. It also has a lot of kind of gay romance connected to it, and it's the captain kind of dealing with his feelings for his crewmates, but then also with Dracula in there, it's kind of eerie sense of foreboding, and I do think it was incredibly atmospheric and really good at really ramping up that kind of sense of horror and slight body horror in there as well. This sort of crew members going missing slowly but surely, rats appearing, it being very spooky, this sort of fog creeping up, so it would definitely be a great read for like October. But like I say, I think if you're like more literary fiction inclined, you'll really enjoy this one, whereas I prefer my kind of novelization to be a little more standard when it comes to the narrative form and like sentence structure and stuff. So that was the only thing that really kind of knocked it down a notch for me. The next book that I finished is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. This is a classic written at the turn of the century, and is specifically about a gentleman who gets engaged to kind of a high-flying socialite with a very rich family. They're very concerned about their own image. I believe it's set in kind of Manhattan or somewhere in America, kind of New Yorky type of thing, but his fiance's sister is a bit disgraced, shall we say, and he has quite strong feelings for the sister, and it's about them dealing with their kind of longing and wishing that they could be together, as well as him trying to stay faithful to his fiance. It was generally kind of, it was fine. I enjoyed it enough to keep reading it. I did really like the yearning, and there were a few moments where it really did kind of capture my attention, but I was a little bit bored of a lot of the kind of high socialite conversation, and it felt just a little bit twee, a little bit tired. The ending I didn't really like. I felt like it was quite forced, the epilogue, so it's not my favourite of Edith Wharton. And I think one of the things that I didn't overly enjoy was it was a the main character was a man, and I just find that, like, the other Edith Wharton I've read, which is The House of Mirth, is told from the point of view of a woman, and I just think that the voice is better in that, and like the plight of women in society I think is more interestingly kind of explored. This felt a little bit kind of tired social commentary that's been done before kind of thing, which is always difficult with a classic, because you never know when you say been done before. Like my knowledge of chronology of classics in like literature in general is not strong enough to know if this was particularly revolutionary or not, but yeah, I didn't really like the man's voice, and I just kind of found his sort of position of like, oh, I wish I didn't have to be stuck by such strict kind of social morals, felt a little bit tired, when actually the sister that he was falling in love with was infinitely more interesting as a character, and I really want to spend more time in her head rather than his. But fun enough to finish reading, and I'm pleased that I did read another Edith Wharton. The next book that I finished was actually a total spur of the moment, and this is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society book club something. It's an incredibly long title, can't remember the author, it will be here. Basically, I watched the movie and then was like, I desperately want to know more about the relationship between two characters in particular. I will get the book super cheap on Kindle and blitz it in a couple of days because I want to know more. And actually I was really let down by the book. I think the movie's better, and I kind of wish I hadn't really bothered. And the thing that I really struggled with was the relationship that I wanted to explore in the book isn't explored anymore in the book. If anything, it's given more airtime in the movie. So this like building up of kind of yearning and wanting was sort of lacking for me, and the book is entirely told in letters. It's kind of an epistolary novel, and I just felt like that didn't work for a lot of the like pasting felt really weird. It's like, it's not how letters would actually be written, and I kind of wanted to scrap the letter format and just kind of really get into the meat of it. So what is the book actually about, rather than just complaining about the things I didn't like? So what it is it's kind of a historical romance, and it's specifically set just after the Second World War, and it's about a young writer who is struggling to kind of find inspiration for her next book, and she ends up by kind of a random chance sort of pen pal encounter finding out about this book club that exists on the island of Guernsey, which is just off the coast of England between Great Britain and France, and it's one of a series of islands that were actually occupied by the Germans during the Second World War. It's kind of the only areas of England that were actually occupied, and we didn't actually get them back from Germany until after liberating France, because basically that was more important, and then we sort of did this kind of mop-up thing at the end. So it's within the only kind of British citizens who lived under German rule, and it was about, the book is kind of looking at their time, sort of the marks of war, and what was it like for these people who were so isolated and cut off from the rest of kind of the mainland as such. And then there's sort of some intrigue going on in there as well, some characters, and kind of looking at what does it mean for somebody to be your enemy and things like that. So like I say, it was fine. I would actually suggest that you watch the movie instead. I talk about the movie in a video I recently put out, which is some of my favourite historical TV shows, movies and one musical, which I will link everywhere. But yeah, so like, pleased I read it in the sense of getting that kind of ticked off my list, but I didn't actually enjoy it as much as the movie, and yeah, it didn't really yearn in the way that I wanted it to. The next book that I finished is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is translated from Japanese and is kind of a weird, freaky, magical realism / dystopian-y type book. I don't really know. It was a very trippy reading experience, but a very enjoyable reading experience. Basically, it's about these people who live on an island where there's some kind of like secret thought police type thing, and basically it gets decided that certain things have to be forgotten, and when they are, they literally do get like forgotten from your brain. Like all emotions and connections to these things will go, and then you have to destroy whatever they are. So it could be like oranges one day, just everybody forgets kind of what an orange actually is, and then the island, everybody rounds up all the oranges and like throws them in the ocean, and then no more oranges, and then like a week later it might be like pansies, and like it kind of progresses from there, and like things go missing. But there are some people on the island that for whatever reason don't forget these items, and it is about, in particular, our main character trying to hide her publisher, because she's actually a writer, or her editor maybe, who he doesn't forget these things and she's trying to hide him. So it's kind of a conversation about sort of memory and the importance of memory. There is this weird, like I say, kind of dystopian thing over the top of sort of state control, and then there's also, because our main character is a writer, there is her actual book sort of interlaced through, and there are a lot of parallels between the two. It's the kind of book that is incredibly lyrical, incredibly kind of pretty and lush. There's not an overt amount of both world building or plot. It just sort of kind of meanders in this very focused on the setting in kind of the atmosphere sort of way, and this general sense of uneasiness of things slowly going missing over time. I really did enjoy it, but I do think it's definitely a book for more like people who enjoy kind of character driven, slow paced reading rather than something really like hard hitting fast and kind of fast. A lot of dystopian books are more focused on like the regime and the world building, and like it's really kind of intense about sort of one person up against the machine. This is not interested in that. It's sort of using this template to kind of explore emotions and memory and our connections to physical objects, and kind of how important is memory to our identity. So fun, strange. I'd have to sit and like dedicate chunks of time to it. It was not one that I could pick up, read a few, like read 10 pages and put back down. I couldn't do it on lunch breaks at work or anything like that. I really had to dedicate like a solid 2 hours of I'm going to read and I'm going to sink into this world sort of a book to really do it justice. So it's just something to kind of bear in mind with it. The next book that I finished is Such a Fun Age by Kiley, Reid, and this is a really cool contemporary book that I actually listened to on audiobook, and it's a fantastic narrator who I will try and remember to link down below. This is about a family, and there is a fairly young black woman who is the kind of nanny slash babysitter for this fairly rich white family, and due to some kind of like altercation that happens in the house, she gets asked to take one of the kids just sort of out of the house away quite late at night. So they go to a local grocery store, and then a woman calls a security guard and basically tries to accuse our main character of stealing this kid. It gets filmed and it kind of spirals from there. Now this is sort of this event does kind of link through the book and becomes sort of a driving force for certain plot points, but really the book is more kind of a coming of age story of our main character trying to decide like what does she want to do with her life and her career, because she can't really babysit forever. A lot of her friends are kind of getting promotions and moving on, and it's about her feeling very connected to the child but also wanting a lot more kind of stability and security both in her career and also in her relationships. And then it's also about this white woman who, off the back of this particular incident, kind of ends up fetishizing the black nanny and like basically getting weirdly obsessed with her. And there's a lot of conversation about sort of white people tokenizing black people and sort of black bodies in their space as such, and sort of there's a lot of different conversations about race and race relations in it. Really interesting, a lot of different things going on, and like I said, fantastic narrator who I'll link down below. The narrator also did The Space Between Worlds, which was a sci-fi book that I loved a couple of months ago, and I'm definitely going to find out if this narrator has done anything else, because I definitely just really like the work that she does with her characters and like her character voices. Really fast-paced book, really enjoyable, so much to kind of think about, but also like just really fun. Like I say, like really kept the pace going. Good like speedy read, which is always nice, because some of these were intense and slow, very slow paced, lots of classics, lots of sort of freaky literary things. So this was a real like bam bam bam, let's do this kind of book, which I love. Then I had a really good time with Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. This is a classic. Daphne du Maurier is a classic author. I can't remember what she was writing, sorry, but this is actually a historical fiction even when she was writing it. So it's both an old book that it was also set even older ago, which is always fun. And it is about a woman who decides to take some time away from the city, so she goes to their kind of country abode that they don't spend much time in, and so much so that there are like no servants or anything. The house isn't really ready, and she goes there to kind of get a bit of time away from high society, and then in doing so she finds out that the village is being terrorized by a French pirate, and then she ends up running into this wonderful French pirate, and they have a torrid love affair, and there is so much yearning, and it's just a classic super fun historical romance that I had such a good time with. It's like a proper swashbuckling tale on high seas. It is everything I wanted from this book. And like Daphne du Maurier often does a lot of kind of thriller, kind of psychological stuff. Her other book is like Rebecca or My Cousin Rachel. They often have lots of like intrigue going on and kind of quite complicated plots, and this one really, you could almost like feel how much fun Daphne du Maurier was having with it, because it isn't the same as her other stuff. It really is just a sort of quintessential historical romance with as much of a kind of bodice ripper as it would have been in those days. So no, it doesn't get explicit at any point, but it kind of goes into the romance as much as you would kind of expect from the time period. And yeah, I had such a good time with it. I blitzed it in a few days. I listened to an audiobook. I loved it. I loved the pirate character. He sounds very sexy. Rather than having another Pirates of the Caribbean, can we just make this into a movie? It probably is made into a movie, but I'd like Orlando Bloom to play, or maybe Viggo Mortensen to play our wonderful pirate. That would be great. But yeah, so I had a great time, and it's really cementing Daphne du Maurier as a favourite author, because this is the 4th book of hers that I've read now, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. Okay, the next book that I finished was a fairly cute YA on Kindle Unlimited called Locke and West, and it will be here. I can't remember the author, I'm very sorry. This is a gay romance, and I don't really know whether I enjoyed it or not. I don't read much YA kind of on purpose. I do find stylistically it's a little bit more simplistic. I think that the characters often kind of say their motivations a little bit more. And this one really just felt like, how many shitty things can the characters go through? So it was like a fairly easy read, and I was quite invested in their relationship to begin with. And then it just kept heaping on more and more and more stuff. So one of our main characters is suffering from an eating disorder and some anxiety and some issues with his parents, and then the other one's in the closet. His mum has kind of flaked on them and is like working crazy hours, and I think has a drinking problem because his dad has walked out on them, and he's like left to take care of his younger brother, and is basically crumbling under that pressure. There's some kind of like there's a rape scene in it. There's self-harm. I'm sure there's at least one other thing. Like, it really was just kind of the list of things to tick when it comes to trigger warnings, and it just kind of got to the middle point. And like I say, I was just kind of sick of seeing these characters in pain, and it felt like a little bit of how many sort of buzzwords of things teenagers might go through can we hit in one go. And I'm not saying that people can't experience all of the things that these characters did experience, because obviously I do know that like life is messy, and sometimes misery loves company, and people get really like shitty lots in life where everything sort of racks up. But also from a reading experience, it felt really sad, and I just wanted them to be happy. So I don't really know how much I enjoyed it, but it was on Kindle Unlimited. It was quite a quick read, so meh, there's that. The final book that I read is Built on Bones by, again, can't remember the author. It will be here. I'm really sorry, I'm bad at authors at the moment. This is a non-fiction. It's one of the few non-fictions I've actually read. It might be the only non-fiction. Oh my god, it is the only non-fiction. Wow. I've got loads on the go at the moment, but I think they've just taken ages. I haven't really finished anything in July. So yeah, anyway, it's a non-fiction, specifically looking at archaeology and kind of early humans, and is looking at the classic argument that we quite often hear about the idea that life was so much better for humanity before we moved into cities, and then cities brought rack and ruin on the human race. And it's looking at this and being like, actually, how true or not is this? Was there more sickness? Was there more violence? How was our diet? How was our working life? And there isn't really a concrete conclusion at the end. It's sort of like cities were both good and bad, because of course it is, because it's non-fiction, and like life doesn't give you really neat conclusions most of the time. You can't definitively say whether moving to cities was good or bad for humanity as a whole. That's too big a macro question. But it is definitely a really interesting look at what can we learn from bioanthropology and kind of the study of human bones and human remains, as to what insights does it give us to how people actually lived, and things like instances of violence, disease, etc, etc. So yeah, so really enjoyable. I found that the audiobook, basically the author is incredibly knowledgeable, has a really lovely writing style, but has these like footnotes that are just trying too hard to be funny, and the audiobook reads out all the footnotes in the actual text, which I kind of appreciate in some ways that they did, because most audiobooks leave out the footnotes, and that's annoying at times when the footnotes contain a lot of information. But when they're just like trying too hard to be funny, pop culture references, cringy like mum and dad jokes, if that makes sense, it really ruined the flow for me and kind of kept pulling me out of sort of the science. So I actually found that I had a much better time swapping to the ebook for this one, and it definitely slowed me down at the beginning having the audiobook, because I was like, I don't want to listen to that woman's crappy jokes anymore. So yeah, so would recommend either the ebook or try out her humour. If it appeals, check out the audiobook. It'll be jam-packed full of it. If it doesn't appeal, stick to the ebook or physical book. So yeah, so that is it from me. I have started like 6 other books I've got on the go at the moment. Quite a few of them are actually ones that are technically for the history challenge, but I couldn't resist. So I've been trying to pace myself with them and sort of not just blitz them too early, But then again, even if I do, I'll just read different history for the history challenge. And one of the things I really enjoy about readathons is when I know that they're coming up, it encourages me to read more from that genre anyway. So even by the time we get to it, I've always read more off my bookshelves for it. So I think that's always really good. I do the exact same thing for non-fiction November. I get excited and start reading tons of non-fiction like a week before. So that's absolutely fine. So yeah, so a bit of a strange reading month. A lot of stuff that was a little bit meh, but some really solid new favourites in there as well. So can't complain, can I? Have a wonderful reading week, and I will chat to you soon. Bye.